Hey everybody, it's Nate Leslie here again today with one of my partners in the West Coast Hockey Prep Camp, Kerry Gladson. Kerry is also BC Scout for the Swift Current Broncos in the Western Hockey League. And we're grateful for Kerry to join us today to talk a little bit about just the landscape that players are in right now in the middle of this pandemic as athletes and families are kind of wondering what their future holds. So Kerry, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Okay, right on. So we're going to hop right into it. Basically, we're looking at 3 birth years of kids and then older ones. So we're going to start with the 2006 born kids that are hoping to be drafted into the Western League this coming draft. So why don't we start there? Just dive right in.
Sure. Yeah. So the '06 group, very unique this year, as you know, as everyone is well aware. We've been dealt circumstances that I don't think any of us have been through before. What we've done in Swift Current for that '06 group is when the rinks were open across Western Canada, we were in rinks watching games. A lot of games have been watched online. That is available to us. So what we have done is we have created our preliminary list of players for that '06 draft. And maybe I'll back up one step, Nate. That '06 draft is typically the first Thursday in May of each year. So typically that would be May of 21 would be the draft for that '06 group. What's happened is the Western League has changed that to December of 21. So quite a unique situation. So that particular group of kids that we have scouted, that we are watching, and that we are basically on the sidelines waiting to get back into rinks to watch, they will continue to be heavily scouted as soon as they're allowed to be on the ice, whether that be January, February, right through the summer, and again, obviously into the fall. They'll be watched very closely right up to that December draft. So that's the '06 group that's currently playing U15.
Okay. Yeah, and that's, as you mentioned, unprecedented, and we've talked about that with prep camp, obviously. Scouts that haven't been able to see kids much during the year now have an entire summer and another fall, so they're getting an extra 6 months. So a lot of the scouts that come to watch the kids at our camp, like yourself and our other partner Mike Coughlin in Portland and many others, that's a unique opportunity where normally that draft has already happened for that group.
Yeah, you're correct. And it's funny because as scouts, we always like to say the best player that wasn't drafted, if we could not scoop, but if we could get that player, because there's so much developmental time between the May draft and fall. And these kids, you know, the age they're at, their skill levels changing so quickly that, you know, that's why kids are still scouted quite heavily after that draft. So this does give kids a little bit of an opportunity to, you know, hone their skills even more before that draft.
Okay. And so let's jump 1 year younger now to the '07 kids. Where are they at?
So the '07 kids, so that's typically, they'll be the first year players in U15 or major bantam or minor bantam. So they would be watched this year with the thought in mind that they will be drafted in May of 2022. Now, the unique thing this year is we have to prepare for a December draft and then another draft 6 months later. So that means that '07 group is being watched even closer even now, because there's only so many hours to be in so many rinks, to watch so many games. So we have to start compiling lists of that '07 group earlier. So when we complete the '06 draft, we can jump right to the '07 and get that ready for the next draft.
We've talked about this a lot, and some parents might be listening thinking, like, '07, like these are young kids. Just shed some light on why the draft years are what they are in the Western Hockey League.
The draft has been the kids that, you know, historically that we had called it for years bantam or U15. So they play against their own age group that year. It allows us continuity and skill level across the board age wise. There still is a bit of a difference, obviously, between a December born and a January born, but that 1 year sort of allows us to see those players perform at their best against equal aged kids. as opposed to a draft that was a year, that could be a year later, for example, like they do in Ontario and Quebec. Those kids could be playing minor midget, major midget, U16, U17, U18. So that, we're talking multiple different leagues against multiple different aged players. So much more difficult to really assess the skill level of a player, if they're playing in those parameters.
Okay. And so let's go to the kids that, in theory, the birth year that has gone through a draft. Many players not drafted, but the 05s, where are they sitting right now in the eyes of the scouts?
That's a very interesting group. So your 05 group was drafted. They did not go to a training camp because there wasn't any training camps this summer. So they're going to be going to their first camp a year older than typically they would. So, there's, first of all, I guess you break it into two ways. There's a lot of prep required for those kids. They have the opportunity to come to those training camps already a year older. And if they are at call it an elite level, they could stay right with the big club as a 16-year-old, because that's the first year you're allowed to play in the Western League. Also, the players that weren't drafted that are, typically very highly coveted, because it's like I mentioned, it's such a fluid thing where the skill levels do change at that age so quickly. Their scouts are going to be scrambling to watch that age group that wasn't drafted to see the change in these players. So now these players are going to be a year older, and they're going to present a whole different skill set that the scouts are going to be clamoring to be able to watch to see which kids have changed.
Let's just take a second to reframe that. Pretend that you're talking right now to a kid, 05 kid, maybe even an 04, and we're going to get to the older ones in a second, but a player who was not drafted, who has dreams of playing junior hockey. What's your message to them?
Okay, so you weren't drafted. Just for a real quick review. So each Western League team, there's 22 teams in the league, has a 50-man protected list. That 50-man protected list, or 50-player protected list, includes all the players that are playing on the big club, as well as players they have drafted and players that they have scouted to see that have potential to potentially play in the league. So if those players have not been drafted, they have the opportunity to get on these lists, to be followed closely by the big club, and obviously come to camp. Each team would typically have 2, 3, 4 spots available to fill, and that would be filled with players that obviously had not previously been drafted. So they're the ones that, scouts are going to be watching very closely.
Okay. So that I think that's important to note, because some players, young athletes, think, I wasn't drafted, it's over for me. And we've always said, you just got to keep getting better every year. And what you're saying here today is that those kids, they just have to keep that dream alive and that goal in mind, and that they are being watched. And if they're great players, they will be seen.
Yeah, that all-star team of players that were never drafted includes players like Jerome McGinley, Duncan Keith, Milan Lucic. You can put in some pretty interesting all-star teams of players that weren't drafted when they were, their first draft age, but they were listed subsequent to that draft.
Yeah, perfect, awesome. Anything else you'd like to add to those older ones? We kind of stopped at the 05s, and we did want to talk about, I guess it would be, those kids that are in the midst of that U17 U18 era. Anything you want to add that we haven't yet?
Yeah, again, 04s, 03s, there's a lot of kids, again, that do become, call it junior hockey level capable at older ages. Kids mature at different ages. Their skill sets change again at different ages. Just, I referred to the players that were never drafted. So those players are watched as well. So a player does end up playing junior B as a 16 or 17-year-old, or plays U18, they're also watched quite closely, because, like I say, the game changes so quickly now. There's so much skill base to it. We watch, like right now we're in the midst of the World Juniors. We see the tremendous skill level that's on the ice. So, I mean, if you have skill, if you are a great skater, if you think the game well, you will be seen. I guess that's probably the easiest message I could give.
And let's take that one step further. You and I talk about this a lot, Kerry, is what you're looking for besides that skill and the background that you guys look into with players and how important character is and how they do in school, etc.
Again, great question. A couple of things we do if we scout in a typical scenario where it is in a rink, for example, we watch warm up. We watch the body language in warm up. We watch players, what they do away from the puck. We watch players when they go to the bench after their shift. We watch players when they get a penalty that maybe it was a tripping penalty. The guy accidentally stepped on a stick. How does the player respond to that? And again, we break it down. It is a game of mistakes right up to the elite NHL level. I mean, the idea is as you go up the chain skill wise, there's less mistakes to your game, but we acknowledge there's mistakes at every level. I like to use the example of a player named Ty Smith that was drafted first round by New Jersey when he played Bantam for Delta Academy. He was on the ice, power play defenseman, has the puck behind the net, goes in front of his net, goes to pass the puck out, misses the puck. Player in the other team takes the puck, puts it in the net. They just got scored on shorthanded. First thing you do is you watch his body language. He goes to the bench. He doesn't have his head down. He's watching the play. He can't wait to get back out on the ice. Yeah, he made a mistake, but now he wants to get back out there and correct that mistake. So you almost give the guy a plus just for that body language alone, as opposed to a minus for what he did.
Yeah. What's a pitfall you've seen in players that have been drafted high and for whatever reason, maybe it goes to their head, maybe they think, okay, now I've made it. What advice do you have for those players who are in the pipeline and who are getting the attention? Because it is a lot for a young athlete to deal with.
Right. But these players that have been drafted or have been identified are typically part of their game they're quite good at, whether it's their shooting, their skating, their vision, different parts of the game. But there's deficiencies in all their games, obviously, just due to the fact of their age and the fact they've only played so many years. So we like to tell these players the things you need to work on, whether it be strength, stamina, your sleeping patterns, your eating habits, your schooling, the things that you're good at, you better work really hard at those because you're elite, because you're good at that. The things you're not good at, this is when you have to really bear down and bring those up as well. What we see quite often is you'll see a kid, if you have 4 items that you grade somebody on and they're really good at a couple and they're not fantastic at these, if they work at these and they don't work at the other, they've gone from 4 items down to 2. So it's really imperative that the kids maintain that level of all facets of their game.
And what about being a team player? When you look at Team Canada World Juniors right now, you probably know the stat. I think it's almost every player on Team Canada is a first-round pick. Yet there's guys that have to go to that tournament and play a role that they've normally been the go-to. They're the guy. They're the first Western League draft pick or whatever. They're top of the heap. When it comes to being now a smaller fish in a bigger pond, or whatever cliche you want to use, what advice do you have for young athletes about that as they're changing roles as they move up through the ranks?
A great example would be Peyton Krebs. Watched him. We played Bantam. We played for Okotoks. By far and away the most skilled player on his team. If anybody in his team was open and he should pass to them the puck, he did. He was such a consummate team player, even at 14. Now, fast forward, he's been drafted NHL first round. Team Canada has put him up and down. He's played on 4th line, 3rd line, 2nd line, 1st line. He's played center. He's played wing. He is so valuable to that team. First couple of games of the tournament, he wasn't talked about in broad terms. Now, you watch the games talked about more and more and more because people do recognize here's a guy that can play anywhere in your lineup. And yeah, so super valuable. And another point to that is players, if somebody scores, it's who congratulates that kid right away. Doesn't matter if you got the 3rd assist. If you're just as happy as the player that scored, the scouts notice that because that's a team player.
Yeah. When I talk to parents and I try to compare it to my career, I often like to say, I had a minor pro career of 7 years, and I think I was 25 when I finally realized I was a right winger. You know, we're talking about '07s, kids that are maybe turning 13 this year. And I've had parents of 7-year-olds say, my 7-year-old's a left defenseman. Just in terms of that team player and adaptability and being willing to do what's ever required. What in your scouting meetings, how does that surface?
We try to break players down into three positions: forward, defense, and goal. So obviously, very simple. Goal is goal. A goalie's not going to end up playing defense or forward. A forward is a player that we see more, of an upside to play those forward positions. A defenseman is a player that's able to play, in his own end successfully ongoing. So yeah, we don't pigeonhole that player's a center or that player's a winger. We just break it down to those three positions, if that makes sense.
It does. There was some teams I think I made because I was willing to change sides or do whatever's needed. Right. At the end of the day, a player wants to be on the ice.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And the more positions you play, the better you understand the game, etc. That's maybe for a whole nother conversation. Let's wrap it up with, this has been a really tough year for a lot of people, and today we're talking about young teenage athletes. What's your message to them as we're starting January 2021 here? What's your message to the young athletes out there that are probably watching this?
Yeah, I think first of all, enjoy the process. Yeah, it's very difficult right now. I've been involved in Zoom meetings where we have players in Northern Manitoba, for example, that did not in the fall have any access to ice, and yet they still needed to train to prepare. And there was things as unique as one player, his dad made a sled out of forks for a forklift, and they attached weights to it, and he ran up and down a hill. You see that. You see there's a kid that has like the desire to get better. That same player was flipping a tractor tire. So there's things you can do in any environment. In a perfect world, yeah, you're on the ice 4 or 5 times a week. You have your practices, your couple of games. You have your homework. You have your sleep, and it's a great pattern. This is a unique situation, and so you have to make the best of it. You have to adapt. And I think I'd sort of end it by saying, when you are on the ice, you are watched with all the little parts that come to the game. And you're not graded on one shift, one game, one tournament. It's a long process. As I said, we already have reports on that '07 group that doesn't even get drafted till May of 22. So, sit back, enjoy the process, and do your best, and have fun doing it. If you're not having fun doing it, you shouldn't be doing it.